Good morning. Good morning again, everyone, every African, every friend or ally of the Africans. Good morning. I hope you're doing well today. Um, Again, let's continue with my discussion on my book. Thank you, Mrs. G, which you will find on Amazon and other house websites. Um, Today, as promised, I am going to talk about um, IQ, and um, as you know, IQ measures intelligence, or supposedly it does. But let's just say, like, the origin of IQ really was, back in 1904 or 5, I can't remember, when Francis Binet was commissioned by the government, French government, to do a test where they would measure children who needed help outside of school, individual help, if you were like what we call special class or these days. So they really just wanted to measure the child's physical age against the child's mental age so that they can actually help the children. But as you know, at the time, in those times, the world was very racist in those times. So everything, if it was scientific, it was just tend to prove, or maybe to massage people's um, consciences that, slavery was good. Slavery had stopped at that time in 19. But I mean, obviously, the colonization was going on, and there's always people who wanted to. But before that, before 1904, there was a man called Simon Morton who, towards the end of slavery, I think it's 1839, um, he he, he wrote a book. He measured a lot of skulls, and then he measured. He was trying to compare races, and he put together about 5 races and sort of put them in categories of intelligence. So he thought that the way the skulls were transfigured had a lot of do configured had a lot of do with whether they were intelligent or not. And of course, when he was measuring, he came to the conclusion that Africans were right at the bottom of the pile of those 5 races. So that's where we set. And of course, these are the things that encouraged those laws that actually said we were 3/5 of human, and therefore, when we could not vote at the time, or things like that. So I actually thought that, what Simon Morton did. His book was called, by the way, um, um, uh, Crania Americana, and he packaged it so well and published it that there were about 500 copies. It was a very expensive book at the time, but they were all sold out. And what really I came to realize just when I was reading a few days ago, I had thought that this was a way to push back, on abolition of slavery, which happened then after the 1865 and 1833 in England. But apparently, even the abolitionists actually believed in us being inferior. They actually believed that we. So their argument was that, okay, even though, which is argument I put in this book at some point, even though they were thinking, okay, the fact that we're actually inferior mentally meant that we needed protection. More like the animal activists of this time, that say animals have to be respected, their lives have to be. So really, we were just more or less like, the animals that are being sort of protected today, the activists. So it's just really, it was it wasn't because they didn't, the slavery was not stopped to a large extent because we were human, but it was the belief for some people, abolitionists anyway, belief that because we were less than human, we needed to be protected by the, better humans, which which makes you realize that racist signs started a very long time ago. And I know that in Europe there are other things that were, other scientists that were trying to prove that we are not human. So this argument has been going on for a long time and has been passed on from generation to generation. And so it is, and of course now there's a lot of people that are, the white supremacist itself, you know believes that very much, and that's their argument: the fact that we are not as intelligent as, as full humans or the white man. And a lot of Black people actually believe that. I mean, I know that most of Africa, I had an argument I have a lot of respect for Nigerian people because they're very, um, people who push for success. So I was very surprised when I found myself in an argument on a platform where a Nigerian was telling me, a few Nigerians were telling me that actually white people are superior. We have to come to the extent, to the place where we admit that. I was shocked. And, these are the things that are really, really frustrating because for as long as we think that, we are going to allow people to come into our continent and loot and exploit us continuously because we believe we can't mine for ourselves, we can't do everything for ourselves. And yet, the oldest mine is, I think it's 43,000 years old. I can't remember. It's actually in Swaziland. So we were farming long before, colonization started or even slavery started. But the fact that, the facts, alternative facts, if you want, um, uh, have actually told us there's been a movement of a racist science that has made us believe that really our capacity to think is not as good as the white man's. And a lot of generations have lived under these racist scientists, and they have come to believe it. And it's very hard for and our children think the more they act white, the more intelligent they are. So it is it's really something that weighs on my heart all the time. So um yeah, so as I said, it was intended to really just show a child's, physical intelligence and their um, mental intelligence, just so they can help the child. But then, of course, it was twisted, and it went to, talk to us. So, as I said, Simon Morton, he came up with this, idea of us being less and put, crania americana, measured the skulls. And then a few people really found out that his measurement was biased, but, at the time he had to put some seeds into skulls and see how many, and count how many went into a black skull, how many went into different races. And then it turns out that he packed, tightly packed the white ones so that more seeds can go into it. There's a lot of things anyway that were seen from his rough notes that he made while he was doing it. But I mean, um, my argument is that, we later on they came to realize that really we are the same, you know, we are the same. And if people jumped to a conclusion of, branding other humans as not human or as not fully human, I think there's a lack of intelligence in that itself, because if they were that intelligent, I mean, when we saw the white man, we did not think of him in terms of intelligence. We saw a human being when he came, and I think perhaps mostly that's the reason how Africa was colonized, because we thought everybody had good intentions. We looked at them as humans, as people who would, love us the way we love them, and we hospital, we were hospitable to them, and gave them, allowed them to come in, and of course it turned out to be something sinister that we are still paying for right now. And there are still schools of thoughts that actually strongly believed in our inferiority as a race. And unfortunately, in those schools of thought, there are people who are like us, who are, part of that really, really disturbing thought. So, yeah. So, like Samuel Morton is one of the, and he came to be respected so much for writing that Crania Americana, that Charles Darwin, called him actually an authority, and a lot of people defend that because they want to, they don't want the evolution theory to be disturbed. They always cover up for 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 uh, for Darwin, sorry, Charles Darwin. But it turns out there's a lot of, I think, undertones of racism in a lot of things that he did. But of course they would defend him because they need to, to we have to believe in this evolution theory. So I think we have to come to a place where we question everything. I know if I have to say something like that, I will shake up a lot of people. They want to believe that. But I really strongly believe that science, uh, there's you also need to realize that a lot of things that we invented, like calculus and everything, those things actually existed elsewhere. There's a lot of arguments about whether, Samuel Newton was was the one who really invented a lot of things, a lot of science, calculus. But uh, those different train of thoughts, um, we know that a lot of history was deleted in order to, it was whitewashed, either whitewashed or deleted. Basically, a lot of things that were invented by other, even the East, or Arabs or anything, they were sort of deleted. And somehow history started from when the white man was able to check on us and see how we thought and everything. So my my main aim, what I really want to say is this. In my book, I look at a lot of things that were done by the West that really we have to look and ask ourselves, is this what high IQ leads us to? When you think about, I mean, you can't, think about IQ, not think about the fact that these young people who are going around shooting everybody, right? You know, Sandy Hook. Just think about it. Somebody just walks into a place where there are young people and starts shooting around. And we still think those are the people of the holders of the high IQ. There's a man I mentioned in my book, um, 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 Harold, sorry, um, the guy that, a doctor that killed 218 people. He was a doctor. He was looking after the elderly and he killed them. 218. These are the known cases, and they believe that the real cases should be around 250 or more than that, and we still believe. You walk into a doctor's, most people would be confident to walk into a doctor's, a white doctor's, surgery more than a black doctor's surgery. But Harold Wilson is the man who killed 218 elderly people. These are vulnerable people that he killed. And these are people who depended on him to look after them. They believed in him keeping them alive, and he killed them. We don't have that. We have a man who came to Zimbabwe, I know, an American guy who actually came in and was found out to have been killing people. Is this what the high IQ is about? I mean, I question that, and I question the fact that the nuclear weapon, which has only been used, by the way, by the United States twice. And they're the ones right now who are inspecting people on whether they have nuclear weapons. And of course, we know that the Saddam case, where he was said to have, weapons of mass destruction, and it turned out to be something which was not true. And today, Iraq is still suffering from that, and we know that he was killed for nothing, and now they are suffering, and nobody will take refugees from there. This just continuous civil war going on there. We can look at the West as the people who have the high IQ, but we have to look and see what are they doing. Is this in the end profiting the world? You think about plastic. I laugh when I think about plastic because it was a great invention from the West. And it turns out that plastic is actually people are throwing plastic into the sea, and it's killing a lot of sea life. Think about the planes. Think about the fact that the planes were brilliant and good, but now they're being, they're trying to find ways because the pollution is too much. There's a lot of things that you could go back and that were meant as credit. Slavery itself, colonization itself was a lack of looking at people and saying and really valuing the difference in culture. But what did they do? They actually came and changed the culture, changed the language. And thereby the world is diverse. That's what makes the world beautiful. Our different cultures, our different languages. But the languages were imposed on us for whatever reason. That's not intelligence. I really question in this chapter. I actually don't go through everything that was going on in my mind at the time, but I looked at everything. I looked at a lot of things, and I realized that the peaceful people that we were, of course there were tribal wars, of course there was invasions, but I mean, think about what King Leopold did, cutting people, killing people. I mean, 2 million people were killed by, Leopold, and he had no regrets at all. When they tried to take him out of Congo, he bent down every record that he had, you know. He said, they're taking my Congo. And he looked at these people as people who are less simply because they were different. That's not intelligence. If you look at somebody and because they're different from you, you think they're less than you, you're not intelligent. So we have to question, because at the end of the day, those tests were never invented by us. And they were invented by people who had a lot of things that they did not know and just did not understand the fact that they did not know those things. And just because they didn't know does not mean those things don't exist, doesn't mean that they're not legitimate in their existence. So one time I went on a YouTube page and this man was talking about IQ. Yes, it's true that races, IQ depends on the race and everything. He was, an old man. And and there were young people who were there, who were sort of commenting. So I don't know, I just bumped into it, and it was on YouTube. And I just started to explain the nuclear weapons, the guns, everything. I said all those things were invented by people who said they had a high IQ. Think about everything in the world. And I was blocked by those people, because at the end of the day, you can't. And he was saying, oh, we're just trying to do it so that we can help them, because the place is the continent. Africa is the lowest GDP, and it's because the IQ is very low. And by the way, GDP itself is, it's questionable. You can't measure it, especially in Africa, where people are not registered. There are a lot of people who have ways of earning income which they're not registered, so they can never trace. So you could think. So I, I commented, and I explained, all the Sandy Hook and all that. I did a long thing, and the next time I think I was blocked because they took me off that page. But we need to be questioning. We need to challenge those thoughts, because those thoughts, when they come, when our children are confronted by people like that, they're going to just be to believe. But there's everything. The scientists, in the first place, we should not. We should invent our own ways of measuring intelligence, if at all we have to measure it. If at all we have to measure it. Okay, because at the end of the day, creativity, as they said, creativity is not really fully measured by these IQ tests. And emotional intelligence is not really measured properly. So all these things we just made, these measurements that were made to just prove that we are less, and we have to get away from them and start thinking about ways to measure what we want to measure, what's important to us, because obviously it's not. So anyway, that's what it is with IQ, but I'm sure you will enjoy it. It's a very sort of tongue-in-cheek um, uh, chapter, and I go all the way to rubbish all these things that they use, measures they use to call themselves superior. And as I said, this book is a rant altogether, and that's what it is. So thank you very much for joining me today. As I said, my website is up and running now. I'm happy to, and it's www.thankyouMrsG.com, and it was done by Fosoa J. Mourinho. He's very good, and he's my son. He's very good. So if you're interested in a website, somebody doing a website for you, you can get in touch with him. Thank you very much.